Hi, everyone. It's been 75 days since October 7. 75 days that we have been exposed to stories of heroism and survival that are beyond our imagination. A few days of excitement and relief when we saw some of our hostages being brought back home, but our hearts are not complete. We know that there are 129 people that are still there, still not home. Children, young women and men, and elderly still being held captive in Hamas. Today, we will hear the story of two families whose loved ones are still there. Welcome, Rachel Goldberg and Joan Paulin. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
My name is Rachel, and I am the mother of Hirsch Goldberg Polin. The last time I saw Hirsch was on Friday night, October 6th. At 11 p.m., Hirsch headed out to meet one of his childhood friends, and they were going to go to an all-night nature music festival in the south of Israel, ironically called the Festival of Unity and Love. The next morning, a bomb siren started to blare in Jerusalem. Immediately, two texts popped up on my screen. The first text said, "I love you," and the second said, "I'm sorry." I immediately knew something horrible was unfolding in my world. When that massacre began, Hirsch and 27 others managed to escape to a roadside bomb shelter and hid inside.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Hamas militants came to the doorway and began throwing in hand grenades. Most of those young people were now dead. Some were alive and wounded and trapped under the dead bodies. We know that Hirsch and two other young men were ordered to stand, and when Hirsch stood up, they all saw that his left arm had been blown off from the elbow. They were loaded onto a Hamas pickup truck and headed toward Gaza. Hirsch's last cell phone signal was found inside of Gaza at 10:25 in the morning on October 7th, and since then we know nothing. We have begged the Red Cross and all other international humanitarian aid organizations to find out if the hostages, who are from 33 different countries around the world, who were severely wounded like Hirsch, were they treated? The grandmothers, the babies. But our pleas came to no avail. So here I live, in a different universe than all of you. We seem like we live in the same place, but I, like all of the mothers and all of the fathers and wives and husbands and children and brothers and sisters and loved ones of the stolen, we all actually live on a different planet. This planet of beyond pain, our planet of no sleep, our planet of despair, our planet of tears. We, the families of the 200 hostages, are far away on our own planet of agony. But where are you? Where is the world? Why is no one crying out for these people to be allowed access to the Red Cross? Why is no one demanding just proof of life? I implore world leaders who have been working tirelessly to get all the hostages free. I beseech you to remain steadfast, determined, and tenacious. And may God be with you, because the time is running out to save them. The time is running out to save all of us.
Thank you again so much for spending your time with us today.
Thank you.
I'll start with a simple question. Can you please describe your family to us? Just tell us a little bit about you guys.
So I think that we're a pretty average, happy, normal family. Hirsch is our oldest, and he just turned 23 on October 3rd. And Libby is 20, and Orly, our other daughter, is 18. And we live in Jerusalem. John and I both grew up in Chicago, and Hirsch and Libby were both born in Berkeley, California. We like to blame that on why Hirsch has some hippie, crunchy granola ways. And then we lived in Richmond, Virginia for almost 4 years, and we had Orly in Virginia. And we came to Israel 15 years ago, and you know, happy, traditional, normal kind of family.
Can you share a little bit about Hirsch? What type of a person he is? What his dreams are?
Well, so I always say that's, you know, our favorite topic is talking about our kids, like any
Right.
parents. So, Hirsch, people have probably heard me describe him. Hirsch is a curious, very respectful, funny, with a dry sense of humor that is sarcastic, but never goes mean, which I feel like is kind of a clever line to balance on, because sometimes sarcasm can get mean, but he's never mean. He's a voracious reader. He learned to read quite young and loved going to the library, and he would sweep a category, something he became interested in. He would keep reading, you know, 10 or 12 books in a row on the Civil War, and then on the presidents, and on Native Americans. He would like sweep the category, and he had a photographic memory. So he would also really enjoy when people would test him on, okay, who was the 17th president, and what was the dates of his term, and who was his wife, and who was his vice president. And he also became obsessed at a young age with geography and travel. So he always had this bug in his bonnet that one day he was going to travel the world. And he knew he would always ask for maps or atlases or globes for every birthday. And for his bar mitzvah, he got 4 globes. And he was always also interested in National Geographic magazine. That was something that was very cool for him. And when I got him his first subscription, I got the junior National Geographic because he was only in 1st grade. And it's the end of the year when the subscription was running out, and the little card, back in the days when we would actually read real magazines, and then the card would come out saying, you need to renew your subscription. He came to us and he said, listen, this junior National Geographic is beneath me. I need the real National Geographic. So anyway, so that's, you know, that's who he is. And he actually has a ticket on for December 27th next week. He was supposed to be leaving to go to India to start this trip he's been imagining since 1st grade. An open-ended ticket. He said it will be at least 1 year, maybe 2. And we are hoping, obviously, that he will get to take that trip. It probably won't be next week, even if he gets home tonight. I don't think with what he's been through that he'll be ready for his trip next week, but we are hoping that he will be able to take that trip he's dreamed of. And John?
I would just add that Hirsch is really, really great at performing the mitzvah of Kaved et avicha v'et imecha. He's not perfect.
Explain that.
He's not an angel, but he really is respectful. He honors his parents and everybody. And I always say he definitely has a mischievous side. Every teacher he's ever had will tell you that, but always in a way that, as Rachel said, it isn't mean. I've been saying he's 23 years old, and I literally can't think of one time in his life that he actually upset me.
Nothing till today.
No.
Okay, people asked what Kabed et Avicha and Imecha is.
And I whispered to John, I said, say what
I saw that.
means."
Yeah.
Listen to
So-
your wives, people.
So one of the 10 commandments, the commandment of honor your mother and father. he's really good at that commandment.
Very, very respectful.
I see the sticker on your shirt, Rachel. 75 days. So I'm guessing not all 75 days looks alike. Can you describe a day in your life these days?
Well, it's actually interesting that you say that because we kind of feel like it's one long torturous day, actually. I mean, there are the days when we travel, when I actually hate traveling. And of course, the irony is that in the last 75 days, we've traveled 4 times because I was asked, as you saw in the video, I was asked to speak at the UN in New York, and then to go speak in Washington, D.C. when there was the big rally a few weeks back. And then I went to Rome and met with the Pope. And last week we were in Geneva, where I spoke at the UN in Geneva. But outside of those traveling, where we would go just for usually just for the day and then come back, every day is we wake up very, very early. We look at each other and say, all right, we failed, let's go, because there's one mission here, and the mission is to get Hersh and these other hostages home. And so, we work very long days, very, very long days, doing tons of press and media and meeting groups and talking to groups and talking to any political leaders that, are open to speaking with us or asked to speak with us. And it's just from thing to thing to thing to thing until it's very late at night. And then we take our family doctor prescribed sleeping pills for us so that we could at least knock ourselves out for about 4 hours a night. And then we fall into bed and John says, did we do everything we could possibly have done to save him? And, and then we wake up the next morning and say, okay, gotta start it again, roll that giant rock up the hill like Sisyphus in the myth of Sisyphus.
Just to further put framework around what Rachel's talking about, from the afternoon of October 7th, we went into work mode. We said the Israeli government is going to help, the American government is going to help, and they have. But we said we're not waiting for anybody, we're going to do our own thing. And we mapped out plans on whiteboards, and basically everything Rachel's talking about fits into one of the 2 main buckets. One is we made the decision we're going to tell the story, and we made that decision on basically the end of day 2, and we found out from witnesses that he had a critical wound and his arm was blown off. And we said, we need to tell the story to make sure that he gets attention and medical attention and to try to save his life. And the second bucket of work is all under the umbrella of diplomacy, politics, governments, where we've been talking to everybody in the United States government and the Israeli government and other governments around the world that we've thought at different points could be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Were there any points or times where you felt a little bit more hopeful? Were there do you see some the other things that bringing you more hope than others these days?
Well, a few weeks ago when that first, pause happened and those first, more than 100 hostages came out, was a huge ray of light for us. We know so many of the hostage families by this point. And we had also been told before that deal that Hersh would not be part of that deal. So there wasn't any pressure of anticipation of, will he come out? We knew he wasn't going to get out. We knew that that was for women, children, and babies, which we obviously agreed with and thought Hersh would agree with as well. And so it made it where it was just exciting every night to watch who was getting reunited, because we knew these people. So we said, oh my gosh, look, Yair's sister is coming back, and here's so-and-so's daughter and this person's wife. And it was really, that was very hopeful for us. But then the last few weeks have obviously been extremely difficult, extremely excruciating, because part of what happened when those people were released is they were describing what is actually happening there. And that was something that took us already, we're at the ends of the extremes on the spectrum of agony and despair. And then you hear these horrible things that are happening there. And it's almost like there isn't even any more bandwidth or room to be more, in pain.
Although I'll just add, the question of hope is an interesting one, because for 75 days, we've lived a life that we just have to grasp for any hope or optimism anywhere we could find it. And we've found ourselves having thoughts and saying sentences that one would never expect a person to find hope in. The first one was a few days into this ordeal when we got word from the Israeli government that they believed Hersh had been kidnapped by Hamas into Gaza. And we said yes, because the alternative, of course, was many people were killed, right? And then when we saw the video of Hersh being loaded onto the truck with what we already heard was his arm blown off, we, at least I, and maybe Rachel a little bit, but less than me, took a dose of encouragement from that, because we know that he had just been subjected to over an hour of being in a 5-foot by 8-foot bombshell with 28 other people, where 18 of them were killed, many were wounded, and despite he watched one of his closest friends from childhood killed in there, and still he walked on his own 2 feet. He pulled himself with one arm into the truck, and obviously he's in shock and trauma. But I took from that video, okay, he's in control and he's calm, and that gave me a sense of calm. Even at first, when we were told he was kidnapped, just to make clear for people on the call, there's Hamas that most people are talking about, but there's also the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, plus random bandits that were coming in that morning and taking people. And we believe that he's been taken by Hamas, which, as bad as that might sound, possibly is a little bit more organized than some of these random bandits that were taking people. So, places that would normally be crushing, and they were for us doses of finding hope in the situation.
I have to say, just reading about your family and even listening to you guys right now, Rachel, when you said that you saw and you found hope in seeing other people's kids coming back home, and the smile that was on your face, it's just beyond inspirational. So thank you so much for that. You spoke on the video that we saw at the beginning about not doing enough. What are you referring to? And who are the people that are not doing enough? What would enough look like?
Well, that was 18 days in, and I was at the UN, and that was when we knew there were almost, there were people from almost 40 different countries who were Jews, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, and where was everybody? Like, we were running around, desperate, and we just felt like, where are all these other countries that have civilians who have been kidnapped? We felt very much that it was strange that there really were Israelis we saw running around, and Americans we saw running around, and a few Brits. And I'm trying to think, and I think that those were the only 3 countries that we even heard anybody making a fuss about what was happening. Oh, and Germany was being very vocal. And also we were really upset at that time with the Red Cross, because we felt like, the Red Cross has an enormous budget, $2.45 billion a year, that America alone gives them $625 million, all of us taxpayers pay, and yet they weren't showing up to see any of these hostages, which we knew many had been wounded, many needed medication. We knew there were diabetics there who needed insulin. We knew there were children who had been hurt during the abductions. We knew Hersh had his arm blown off. And where were these people? And so that was the desperation. Also, I just felt as humanity, because to me, the hostage situation is an international, global humanitarian catastrophe. It is not a Jewish issue. It's not a Middle Eastern issue. Once you have a population of 240 people from almost 40 different countries and 5 different religions with an 87-year age span, that is not a Middle Eastern issue. And now, of course, we've seen, and now with all that's happening, you know, the war that's happening in Gaza, everything has even more so gotten combined, you know, conflated. And that's our biggest worry, is that these hostages who are still there are going to be forgotten.
So before we end our conversation, one thing that you want the people that are on this call to take from that, something that you want them to remember, something that you want them to act upon, something that you think that they can do in order to help you to help us bring everybody home.
Yeah, so I mentioned the 2 buckets of our work, and I wish I had more specific answers for you that people could do to really bring the hostages home. But what we tell people is twofold. Number one, we worry all the time that the story of 129 remaining hostages is going to fall off the radar. It's going to fall off because news cycles move on and political cycles move on and time passes. And our ask of people is, keep telling the world the story of the remaining 129 hostages, and don't stop telling it until they're all home. And we try to make it as easy as possible for people. We tell the story very actively on social media with the hashtag #BringHershHome. We are part of the broader story, Bring Them Home Now, on social media, and just pull content from those 2 sources, share it, repost it, etc. The second thing is, we know that pushing on elected officials really helps and really matters. And at this point, really, when I say that, what we mean is the White House. We've felt tremendous support from day one from this administration, from President Biden himself, who's been very amazing. And on day 6, on October 13th, he spent 90 minutes on a call with the Americans, and he cried with us, and he let people yell at him, and he was supportive, including last week. So call the White House and say you're not okay with 129 people, including 8 Americans, still being held in captivity.
They have a switchboard, a comments line. It takes less than a minute. You just call and say, it's day 75. There's still 8 Americans and 122 other people held hostage in Gaza. I'm not okay with it. Have a nice day.
Rachel and John, thank you so much for being with us today. You guys are truly an inspiration, and hopefully we'll see Hersh sooner than we think.
Yes,
Man.
we hope next time he's sitting right in between us and he can tell you.
We'll take you in on that.
He can tell you all about the United States presidents in order.
I'm signing up for that Zoom. Remember that. I was the first one to ask for it. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Sharon Lifshitz. Sharon is the daughter of Yocheved and Oded Lifshitz. Yocheved was freed from being captive by Hamas a few days after October 7th, on October 23rd, and Oded is still captive. There's a picture of Sharon and Oded. And now we'll speak with Sharon. Sharon, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm not great, but I'm here.
Thank you so much for being here with us. It's not something that we can take for granted these days. I would like to go back with you to October 7th. Where were you? Were you with your parents? How did you hear about everything that's happening in Israel?
So I was born and I grew up in Israel, in Nir Oz, but I lived all my adult life in England, in the UK. And on October 7th, I was actually on the way to a day out with my family when I saw that the news kicked, and I decided to call my mom, which is what I always do when the border kicked up or there is missiles. And she didn't answer. which was unusual. She usually does. I called my dad and he didn't answer. And then I called my brother, and I could hear it in his voice that things were not okay. Even, you know, we are used to living next to the border. We are used to the missiles. There's a safe room. And he told me that they lost contact with my parents a few minutes earlier, that my father was saying that he's in the safe room, that my mom is still asleep. It was quite early in the morning. They returned home late the night before. And it went from there. And it was only towards the evening that we knew that they were not in the safe room. So many people did manage to stay. And it was only, and then we were told that they're probably hostages. And the next day it was confirmed that the bodies were not found around the kibbutz. But we didn't have a sign of life from them until my mom came back. That was really the first time we heard. There was no footage of them. They were taken very early on. They were taken, so my mom was taken by two Hamas. The 6 people entered the bedroom. They shot my father through the safety door in the hand. He was injured. They pulled him out of the bedroom and they beat him, and he was on the floor. My mom was then taken out. She was in her nightie. She was quite dazed, and they wrapped her with a blanket and put her over a motorbike like a carpet. So heads one side and hands the feet the other side. And they took her through the gate that they broke into, which is very close. My parents' house is very close to the fence, and very the closest houses to the Gaza Strip. And they literally drove at full speed across the fields, as there were hundreds of Shabab, of mob, coming towards the kibbutz and her with sticks and with and shouting Allahu Akbar and shouting Itbach al Yahud. And that was the last time my mom saw my father lying at that point unconscious. When she came back home to us 16 days later, she told us she thought he's no longer alive. And that was all we knew about him until the exchange of hostages that happened at the end of November. Mm-hmm. And with that, we heard from some of the hostages that he was alive at the beginning, that we now know he was alive for at least the first period, the first few days. He was injured in the hand, and he was, the bullets were taken out, and he was bandaged. And we know that he shared a room with one of the hostage, a woman who we know all our life, who was a member of the kibbutz. And this is what we know. We know that he felt unwell one night, and we don't know anything after that. He was moved, she was moved. They often get moved around. My mom was underground, my father was above the ground. So with different fractions in different places.
I see. How is your mom doing?
My mom is a top. She's amazing. She came back, so determined. She is an 85-year-old woman with complex medical needs that is, she's now in the street demonstrating. She's become an icon of it. And I say to her constantly, she has a job to do. And partly I say it because she's an 85-year-old woman who lost her home, lost every belonging she ever had. She was a photographer. She lost all her photographic work from her whole life. She lost my father. She lost 40 members of our community that were killed. 90% of the houses in my kibbutz are destroyed. This is the community she spent 63 years of her life building. So the loss is so immense. It's quite hard to really account for it, to start believing in it. You know, for my community, most of them are in a hotel in Eilat of the survivors. That's a community of 400, and 1 in 4 is murdered or missing or held hostage or is a returning hostage. So it's just, it's a very small community. We know so many people all our life. And so it's quite hard to even think of what next. And we don't. We simply spend all our life at the moment advocating and working for the release of the hostages.
So tell us a little bit about your father. What type of man is he? He is.
You know, he's a stubborn one. My mom was complaining that he's stubborn. You know, she said that the night before they were asked not to come home, but to stay, and had they stayed. And I reminded her that he chased her for over a year before she agreed to marry him. And so, you know, none of it would have happened if it wasn't for his stubbornness. He was a very modest man. He really embodied the spirit of the kibbutz in the sense that he was a brilliant man, and he was a man with a huge knowledge. He was a journalist most of his life. He was a peace activist, and he fought for peace all his life. But he was also somebody who really cared deeply about people. He cared about how it is that you manage to live in this world. I'm trying to find a way of explaining it. He is a brilliant grandfather and great-grandfather. He will take our children, he will take them for 2-3 hours trips to kind of touch leaves and crawl on the floor and be themselves. And they adored him. They really, you know, I once told him, because he was working so hard in journalism and always having very tight deadline. And I said, Dad, what about if you tried yoga? And he said, well, I don't do yoga, I do grandchildren. And he really did, you know, it took such delight in being there for them. My parents' house was never very, it was eclectic, it was very lived in. And what made it so wonderful was that they were both they really loved hosting family, friends of the family, neighbors, whoever came. You know, my mom was 3 years ago, maybe I asked my mom how many people are coming for the second Seder, the Shabbat afterwards, how many people are coming for lunch, and she counted and then said 35. And it's just, you know, they cooked for them. They kind of handled the situation. They just loved having people. They never told the children to take their feet off the sofa or to tidy up after them. They wanted them to feel absolutely at home. And I think that's what really also is so difficult to comprehend now, that our family home is totally gone. And we say bring them home, but in our case, there is no home. You know, home is the family. Home is my brothers and, you know, my mom. But our home, what made our home, and the kibbutz, this place, it needs to be reborn. But, you know, they spend their whole life building it and being part of it. And so it's incredibly difficult to even imagine. You know, my mom would not go back. She refuses to go back. I hope my dad will come back and would be able to think about it with us, to think about where our family is now.
Are there any qualities or characters, like behavior that you feel like you inherited from your parents?
You know, over the last 75 days, we all worked so hard. We are 4 children my parents have, and grandchildren that are, the youngest is 3 years old, but the oldest is 35.
Oh, wow.
And he's got a daughter who is 11. And you see him in all of us. You see the determination. My oldest brother said quite early on that we are blessed because our parents never put the revenge function in our operating system. And I feel that very strongly, that as a family, there's nothing of revenge that I wish for anything, for anyone. I think there is a job to do, but I hate the idea of revenge. I draw no joy whatsoever from it. I think the predicament of other people would never undo our predicament. It's only when my father fought for peace, my mom fought for peace. I refuse to give, as a human being, I refuse to believe that we cannot live in peace with other people. I think the road is longer now, but we have a duty towards our children to offer them something more than an endless war. My father was a very practical man. He was very well informed, and he always said that you make peace with your enemies. And he said that the price of peace is high, but not as high as the price of war. And, it's the first time that we face such events, unprecedented events, and he's not there, and his clarity of thought is not there. And we actively negotiate with ourselves, thinking what he would make of it, what would he think about it, what would he say. And it's quite, we constantly we interview, and we have to think as strategic military men and as diplomatic people, and we have to think what is the right way forward. But part of me feels that there's no easy way and no clear answer. And I wonder if he would have had a clear answer now.
I wish you'll hear his answer soon.
Yeah.
Before we end, what is the thing you want people on this call to take from this conversation? What do you want them to act upon? How do you want them to think and act for your father?
I think we have to return the hostages, all of them. The children, most of them are back, but not all of them. And my father would have think of everyone. My father would not. It's something I keep having to remind myself to think in a very selfish way as well, and to simply ask for his return. And it's something that it's almost growing up in a kibbutz and growing up in a community. There's such a strong sense that we are interconnected. And there's a huge strength that I draw now from this interconnectedness. It's quite a brave decision to do, to build your life in a desert community that you bring up from nothing, and to stay part of a community. And there's a price that you pay for that. I chose not to stay. My brothers chose not to stay. But partially at this moment, I really see the beauty of it, the beauty of our interconnectedness as human beings. My father was born on the 11th of May, 1940, the day after Germany entered the lowlands and France. And my grandparents were so distraught. They came from Poland a few years early. And they call him Oded. And the meaning of the name Oded is to encourage. And they thought that he will encourage them. And he really was a person that always encouraged us as well. I think he will tell us to encourage one another, you know.
Thank you so much, Owen, for your inspiring words. And your father sounds like an amazing man that we'll be happy to interview once he comes back. Thank you so much, Owen.
Thank you.
And again, I want to thank the two families that were with us today. And to end this program, I present to you Alex Feinstein.
You're on mute.
Sorry, everyone. I'm Alex Feinstein. Tamara, thank you for introducing me. Sharon, Sharon, John, and Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today. I am the chair of the Israel Programming Committee, and I wanted to just bring to light a new social campaign that we've just launched. It's called Bring Them Home Now. Our first post went up on Monday, December 18th, and we're asking for your help to support this effort by liking, commenting, and sharing to your own social media networks. Every few days, we will post on Facebook and Instagram on our @JFedGMW account, highlighting one hostage still being held in Gaza. Our posts are going to include a video and a caption. The videos include a Federation professional, leadership, or community member with a photo of a hostage and an end card that reads, "Bring them home now." The caption will read, "We ache for all those, including the name of the hostage still being held captive by Hamas terrorists. Please keep them in your thoughts and share their story until they return home safely." The call to action is to share the post. There will also be a link to the webpage below where you can learn about all of the hostages. Thank you so much for your help in promoting this effort and for coming on this call today.
Thank you all for joining us today.